So, was the person on the other end of Rick's line who you thought it would be? Hey people! Yes, I am a week late. Thanksgiving holiday has kind of caused a bigger interruption than I expected. By the time you're seeing this, the most recent episode of The Walking Dead is out, but I want to go back a week because a lot of important things happened. Let's discuss it. This episode was called Hounded, so let's explore that, shall we? Episode opens up with Merle hunting down Michonne. Hounding her, very literally, if you will. But Michonne is not one to take that lying down, and she is in turn hunting Merle. Alright, let me just say I loved the bitergram. And I have watched this scene several times, and every time zombie guts spill out on Michonne, I die laughing. Die. You see what I did there? Let's take a moment though and look back on Andrea and Michonne's relationship. Yes, they did not have anything to do with each other in this episode, but I came to some revelations. You know, out in the zombie wilderness, Andrea and Michonne made the perfect team. They had each other's backs, they're both very skilled fighters in their own way, and they both enjoy the thrill and the challenge of the fight. It's when they enter a society that their differences start coming to light and you realize that these people are actually polar opposites. Michonne values her ability to fend and think for herself. Andrea values being a part of a society and playing a useful role. So whenever they get into Woodbury, they are still looking out for each other's backs, but they just see very different threats. Michonne actually finds zombies safer than people. Whenever you're out in the zombie wilderness, it's very cut and dried who your enemies are. When you get into a society with people, you have to question everybody's motives. Whereas Andrea feels safer in the community, and she does not want to go back out into the zombie wilderness. She's wanting to protect Michonne from being put back out in that environment. And you know, we see these two personality types in our modern day society. People who value individual freedoms versus the people who value social responsibility. Actually, everybody values both of these things. It's just that one believes that you take care of this and the other gets taken care of, and vice versa on the other side. But anyway, back to Andrea and Michonne. The interesting thing is that either of these personality types cannot exist polarized to their point of view. And we are already seeing Michonne finding this out. She knows how to fight a zombie. A person, however, is a totally different matter. And now Merle, he can strategize, and we see Michonne ending up wounded. She's gonna have to swallow her pride and seek help somewhere. What's gonna be interesting is to watch Andrea be confronted with the problems of her own polarized viewpoint. I mean, we all know that the rug's gonna be pulled out from under her eventually because of all that she does not know about what's going on beneath the scenes. But I really like how in this episode, Andrea is being hounded by her own basic nature. Now, this is something that has been in Andrea since the very beginning, and we got clues into it in second season through Dale. When he was trying to convince the whole group not to execute the prisoner, he appealed to Andrea more than anybody else. And Andrea eventually was the only person to come around and to agree with his point of view. Dale mentioned that she was a civil rights attorney. Now think about what a civil rights attorney is doing. They are supposed to be merciless in a courtroom in order to win for their client. On the other hand, being a civil rights attorney means she's fighting to make the world a fairer, better place. This is what's hounding her. She has to admit to herself that the thrill of the fight may mean more to her than the desire to have a fair world. We'll see which side wins, won't we? Now, of course, on the other side of the world, so to speak, there is Rick being hounded by voices on the other end of a phone line. Now, in an interview, Andy Lincoln mentioned that whether it was Rick's subconscious coming into the foreground or whether it was a hallucination, this is the moment that he realizes he's lost touch with reality, and it brings back into focus what his priorities need to be. I like that Andy Lincoln leaves it open-ended, but I like to leave it even more open-ended than that. Could it have been the spirits of these lost people that are speaking to him on the phone line? Wait, now stick with me, okay? Lori's voice on the other end of that line was very true to Lori. Rick was feeling a heck of a lot of guilt, which he expressed to her, but Lori did not project that guilt back onto him. It was very true to what Lori would have said had she been there. So I like the idea that it could have been the spirit world speaking to Rick through his own subconscious, perhaps. It was very gratifying to finally see him acknowledge that baby and bond with her. A beautiful moment. Now, perhaps the least obvious following this hounded theme is how Daryl was being hounded. Look back at the story Daryl was telling Carl. I'm thinking, yes, he's kind of stepping into a more of a fatherly role. It's funny though how his story, he was trying to bond with Carl, but it wasn't really quite in sync with what Carl went through. Here's the thing. Daryl wasn't really telling that story for Carl's benefit. Daryl was telling that story because he was still being hounded by the mystery of what happened to Carol. And we see that this is really what this is all about when Daryl discovers Carol's knife stuck in the neck of the zombie. This is the first time he is confronted with any kind of real clue as to what happened to her. And I think he's assuming that this zombie ate Carol in the same way that a zombie ate Lori. We see him finally getting upset over it. I mean, he kind of was emotionless, wasn't he, up until this point? And then all of a sudden, he kind of has a little bit of a breakdown. I'm really going to be interested in seeing how their relationship develops from here on. Now, the most pivotal scene in the entire episode, it is obviously the scene in which the two worlds collide in this moment. But it's not just because Merle and Glenn and Maggie collide. For me, the important thing about that scene, I was trying to process it in the way that Michonne was processing it. I mean, first of all, she sees Glenn and Maggie drive up, having no clue who they are. She sees it right off that they are an affectionate couple. Maggie calls out to him to get a stuffed toy for a baby in a prison. Ding, ding, ding. Then here comes Merle. They recognize Merle. They don't welcome him warmly. Then whenever they're talking about Merle's brother Daryl being a part of Glenn and Maggie's group, that had to be the moment that Michonne knew who these people were, because of Andrea's stories about her old group. The interesting thing to me, though, is how did Michonne know exactly where to go to find that prison? I think there's going to be some background on Michonne that reveals a connection to that prison in some way, and I am really looking forward to finally getting to know Michonne a little bit better. Alright, so that's it for this week. Hounded. We'll see what happens in the next week's episode. In less than a week now, because of my delay this time. So tell me, how do you think Michonne found that prison so easily? I haven't read the comics, I don't have an idea. So if you do, sure, I don't care. But give me a spoiler. And I'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.